Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to view Grimm Season 1, Episodes 3 and 4. So, in the early goings of this show, I feel like this is a cop show. Feels too much like a cop show. I'm waiting in upper breath for it to switch into the more fantasy, supernatural way of things. And also, right out of the gate, I knew that the whole cliffhanger thing from the last episode was going to be involved into the following episode. Because, of course you would. And I said B for a long stretch of time there for a reason. And I really would want to go on and groan, just because I think a lot of shows use insects usually fairly early in a lot of their shows. If you look at Smallville, the other show that I've been reviewing fairly recently, they had already like an insect episode and also a bee episode already in like the first season. They kind of blew their quota on insect stuff right out of the gate. And so it seems that Grimm has to go on in the third episode and already give us like, hey, let's go with insects. All right, let's go with bees in the third episode. Wow. And I was like, really? Do we have to? So, but I like the investigation that they do in episode 3. I like where it heads, how it all has a connection, and only Nick could figure out that connection because he read from off of a book, and so he knows what the connection is. And so this all leads to a character that Nick had problems with in past episodes, and is to now have to protect this person who, of course, he does not like. But yeah, so but I'm really enjoying how they're incorporating Monroe in here for these episodes. I liked also how they added the captain more into the show. Like, I'm going to love in the later parts of the show when it really becomes like an ensemble piece, where it's not just Nick and Hank. It is to really, like, they even kind of incorporate Wu more. And so, like, once they start really adding in all these characters and giving us a story focused on all of them, I'm like, yeah, like, this is great. Rather than us, like, having mostly the show focusing on the investigation of things, which is just... And so by the end of episode 3, they tell us that something is coming, and Nick is just like, well, what is coming? And of course, it's not like they're going to just explain that to him, because it's only the third episode. Hey, something is horrible coming by the season finale. Well, when is that? So I can mark that on my calendar. So I can know when the eval is coming. I'd like to just know for future reference. So now we go on into another Z Vesson. That, of course, in episode 4 is a Zigavolk, which is a goat Vesson. And so, I gotta say, for episode 4, there was some really cool, like, special effects to open this episode. And, like, of course, like, I would have loved to just be like, man, if we could just had a whole episode that was just that, like, man, they wouldn't have had to have, like, a whole story or what the heck was going on, who the villain of the thing is. No, just give me more of them special effects. Those sweet, delicious special effects that I really did think was like, man, that was cool. But I get that this show has a budget. And it's lucky to have gotten anything as far as special effects as we were to have gotten, on top of what they were already doing with the Vogues and the Vogues and the shifting and the facials, and yeah. So with that said, in episode 4, we have to come back to again having another creepy, shady guy. And I'm like, wait a minute, like what? Like, man, like in this episode, like I think they have to like go with like some stereotypical stuff. Like, cause you can't get like a surprise of what the Vesson is. Like, oh no, you have to immediately figure out like, oh, this is some shady guy. Yeah, must stereotypically be him. So we have this Zvolk or Zvolk or Zegavolk, who is to be a breeder Vesson, who is to go on and lure women simply by him just being the Vesson that he is, and is to consistently eat frogs, toads in this episode. And so we have the Zegavolk that, of course, is somehow be caging up women. Uh, and so it seems that the case ends up like going from them like finding this woman kind of uh, running off to then connecting it to this bed and breakfast to then connecting it to like, oh, okay, so this must be bad guy in episode. Like really it felt like there is some like stretching going on there, that they couldn't have just gone with the husband and just be like, well, yeah, like this guy was kind of shady, so because like yeah, like her husband was kind of like this shady guy that has his like history, but they're like, oh no, it must just be something else, because at least that guy was being honest with us, so there must be some other element going on. But I guess that also just comes down to good police work, and plus also like we have Nick, who is to be this profiler, who's just like, yeah, like I think we should go in a different direction because he's just so good at his job. And plus also like the episode would have ended a lot quicker and they couldn't have had that. Now could they have? No. So but yeah, but good special effects. I like them. But yeah, I'm just kind of waiting for the show to shift out of the whole like cop thing, because I'm just like, I just want just some other kind of approach to this, and hopefully we'll get there. Um, yeah, it's a cop show, you moron. No, like at some point it'll start to shift into something else. Like it'll give us something different, and I'll be happier when that happens. So, and oh, if I didn't mention, the captain has his own kind of thing going on in this episode, which I liked. I like Sasha. I went on and saw him on the movie Land of the Dead. I think, yeah, like him and John Leguizamo. I'm kind of curious, like, what John Leguizamo's like, because, like, from whenever I've seen him, he's freaking cool. Uh, but so, the captain is to go on and have a little story of his own, and it seems that the uh, that the captain, if he was to go on and have Nick forcibly do something that he didn't want to do in the episode before, now in episode 4 we kind of have the captain who is to just be like, well, hey, you did a thing for me, like you scratched my back, I'm gonna scratch yours now. And so the captain is to go on and deal with something that may put Nick's life at risk, and to possibly just kind of have that be put to bed. And so yeah, like that's very vague, but I'll get into it when we get into episode 4. So with that said, I've talked for far too long about all of this, so let's get into it. Let's get into that double five time territory. Let me know in the comments below how you felt about these 2 episodes, because maybe you liked this show, maybe you didn't like this show, and maybe you're just like, man, you're still going with this one? That show was weird. And I could just be like, great. Or maybe there's people that are fans of the show and like, yeah, like he's doing more of it. I don't know why, but he is. So let's go on into that double five time Terry, or Tomateri. Let's just go. I already effed it up. Spoiler time. It's about that time to spoil this episode. Hey guys, I'm actually wearing clothes that I normally don't wear. It's amazing, right? I'm wearing a hoodie that says Bullet Club on it. Of course, you guys don't know much about Japan wrestling, then you probably have no clue what Bullet Club even means. Like, is he a gun owner? No. It's a Japanese wrestling thing. So anyways, but moving on. So, in episode 3, spoilers now for everybody that wasn't aware. So, in the beginning of this episode, we have a woman who is to be Serena Dunbrook, who is to make her way on to this streetcar, not named Desire, just a streetcar. You guys remember the play, The Streetcar Named Desire? No? Luckily I did. So, Serena makes her way onto this streetcar, and, like, I thought the whole streetcar thing was cool because that, again, is another unique angle that they went with this investigation, or this show. So they're really trying to do something unique here. Great on them. So, as I gave them the presidential thumb. So, Serena makes it into the streetcar, and then all of a sudden we have this guy who kind of has this massive boombox, and all of a sudden everybody is weirdly going on and starting to do YMCA, and it's a whole like flash mob thing, and I'm like, okay, I'm a little confused. Why would you go on and do, like, with a flash mob, just YMCA? Like, I guess because it's like, oh, like, everybody at least will know that. But I guess, supposedly, the second song that they end up using is, like, Hokey Pokey. You don't get to hear the song, but, yeah, so, oddly enough, we had a Selena in this streetcar who was kind of getting bumped around by all these people that are in the streetcar, and I'm just like thinking in my brain, like, if it was like current time, I would just be like, hey, like, social distance. But no, like, Selena is just getting like freaking like hit by everybody, and all of a sudden she gets injected within her neck and she goes down. Maybe it was all that dancing that everyone was doing. Like, she was just like, F this, like, I'm gonna die because, like, I can't take a lot of these people all at one time doing the YMCA. And the killer knew that. The killer knew the girl's one weakness. So, this girl falls, and so you would think there would just be a number of witnesses that would all just be like, yeah, I knew who the killer exactly was. But every time they are to take every single one of these eyewitnesses and interrogate them, they're just like, oh no, I was going on this bus, and like, I was just going with a bunch of random people because I like that kind of thing, just kind of playing and doing the song and dancing and like just having fun, and like that's everybody's like same story, as if they were all told this by a number of people to all say the exact same story, to where Nick is like, God, like, you guys were all just like saying this word for word as if you all read the script and you all had to say the same thing. But so But let's pull back here. So Nick and Hank make their way onto the streetcar, and they found out like this video had hit the web, the internets, and so they're like, well, okay, like we can go on and kind of pull all of these witnesses, but so they find out that Selena had like an injection to be done on her neck because they were possibly thinking that this was to not be a murder. Maybe like she just had a allergy and she croaked, and so Nick ends up betting against Wu to just like, no, this is gonna be a murder, and come to find out, he realizes on her neck there is an injection thing that seems to be unusual, and so they're like, okay, like this is someone got killed here. So we, of course, go on into having Nick question a bunch of the Flash Bomb members, and it seems that Nick is to find a guy named Doug. That it's like, there's something suspicious about this guy. And so Nick is starting to question Doug, and we have Nick who there's nothing that he can really tie this guy onto. And come to find out, when Doug is to turn to one of his other associates, Nick is to see that not only Doug is to be this B. Vesson, but that also another associate behind him, like kind of waiting out in the waiting room, is also a B. Vesson, also a Zellifer. So, because Nick is to go on and ask for Doug's phone, and Doug is like, well, I have a bunch of like personal things on there, and Nick is just like, well, like, so they end up getting a warrant for the phone, and they end up going on and giving Doug back his phone in the interrogation. And so it seems that Wu is to somehow be able to hijack into Doug's phone, while, of course, Doug is to send this text. But we have to go on and get to the second murder that happens in this episode. So, come to find out, we had found that Selena was to be tied to a case for a paper mill, and that that Nick is to surmise that it's like, well, yeah, I'm sure that whoever was to work at this paper mill is trying to get back at this woman, and so they kind of waited a while to go after this woman. So, because she of course is a lawyer. So the next victim, who ends up being Camilla, is to also die via flash bomb, or a flash mob that is around her. And so she ends up getting the same injection. And so now Nick looks into his guide to find out about Zellifers, and is to also go on and know about Hexen beasts. And it seems that they are to have a certain kind of thing that sticks out onto their tongue to say whether or not that they are Hexen beasts. There is to be some kind of unusual kind of marking on their tongues. So Nick then goes on to go with Hank to this paper mill to investigate this location, and it comes to find we come to find out that Doug is to be with a woman called Melissa Wincroft. And so when Nick and Hank make their way into this paper mill, all of a sudden they are to be swarmed by bees, and then they are to both run off into this safe location that they can kind of close these doors so that way these bees can't get to them. It seems that Hank is to get stung numerous times, but Nick didn't get one time stung until the very end of this episode. So we then have Hank going to Juliet, and because I guess he had been stung a number of times via these bees, that Juliet ends up telling Hank that he needs to go on and he needs to rest, or otherwise he'll be no good to Nick. And of course, Nick, who has barely have ever thought about the word rest, because he is consistently working all the time, doing his research. So, Nick then is to realize that he needs to go on and find out about the victims' tongues. And come to find out, the tongues of the victims were to have those markings that Nick had seen in the book from before. And so now he's like, okay, so both of these characters were Hexen beasts, and so there has to be another Hexen beast out there that is also going to be a lawyer that is going to be the third victim. So this is all Vesson related. So, like, that is the reasoning why these deaths are going on, because it's Vesson related. So, come to find out, considering both Serena and Camilla were to be Adeline's friends, that the captain is to go on and tell Nick and to tell Hank that Adeline is to be put onto their protection because they realize that she may be the next victim. So Nick is going on and questioning Adeline and is treating her like the victim, and Hank is going like, hey, like, she didn't do anything wrong here. And it's like, well, like, you don't know, Hank. You don't know. So we have Nick going on in a very creative way, trying to keep poking at Adeline for her almost killing his aunt, and then instead injecting him with that needle. And like, Adeline is telling Nick, it's like, well, hey, like, how about you go on and just do your job? Because if anything, if you don't go on and if you don't protect me, if you don't save me, then won't it look bad on you? And Nick is like, yeah, you're right. But Nick is just like, well, like, what is it to happen if I just, like, accidentally just something happens and you just die? But then Adeline is just like, but you're going to do your job because you're a good cop. And Nick is like, yeah, you're right. You son of a... But, yeah, so, like, the kind of the chess moves happening there. So, we have Nick that goes back to the paper mill, but he then goes with Monroe, and that's when they end up finding out about Wincroft, because it seems that her name was in this file, and Monroe goes on to be like, well, I helped you find that file. I helped you find her office. And we have Nick who tells Monroe it's like good boy, because Monroe is already like telling Nick it's like, hey, don't do any dog jokes for me, like don't tell me to yield, like don't give me any of that dog crap, like that's not gonna fly with me. But then Nick is like, well, good boy, and Monroe's like, you son of a. So Nick is to realize that this is to be tied to a woman named Wincroft, and come to find out there is to have a video that Hank and Adeline is to see, like a whole conference where she's kind of in this office, and it seems that while she's talking, like it seems very clear that that this could be like the villain of this story, and like that this person has motive to get this woman out of the way, and they're like, okay, like this seems right. So we go further on into this episode, and so we have at one point where Grimm is with Adeline, and they are trying to protect her because they realize that the Zelfers are to figure out where Adeline is, and so what ends up happening is we have Adeline that starts fighting off with Wincroft, and Nick doesn't know who exactly to trust, because we also have Wincroft that is talking to Nick, and it seems that Wincroft is wanting to play to be on Nick's side. And so Nick is just like, okay, who am I supposed to go with here? Who is on the right path here? And we also have Wincroft that is telling Grimm that someone is coming for him, and Nick is like, well, who? And Wincroft dies before she is to go on and say anything, because she ends up getting taken out by Adeline, because Nick is just kind of holding a gun out, but he's not going to kill anybody, because like either person wins or loses here, like he has no real stake in the game. So we go on, and we'll go on to the third or the fourth episode. So in the fourth episode, which has really cool special effects in my brain, a lot of people go on and just be like, nah, that looked like garbage. There was some like random visuals and whatever. No, like I thought that was like a cool element that they kind of just added here, and like it was just sad that they couldn't have gone on and like used that more often. But it is what it is with the show. So because the show has a budget, a small budget, but a fantastic CGI budget. Because man, looking at some other shows that have a CGI budget of donut holes worth of nothing, look at any Warner Brothers CW show, and you could just see like, man, they had freaking no budget. They did 10 seasons of show that had no budget. Wow. But so let's go on and let's talk about like the kind of the side story that is going on in this episode. I wanna cover the captain stuff. So it seems that in this episode we have a new Reaper in town, a Reaper called Slivich. And so Slivich is to, of course, be another character that is to go on to make it to the precinct and is to ask about who was to have gone on and killed the last Reaper And so Sergeant Wu is to give the captain this information, and so we have the captain who's saying to Sergeant Wu, it's like, well, hey, do a background check on this guy and get back to me. So Slavich goes to his place, and the captain ends up coming into his place. And so the captain is to tell this Reaper to just stand down here because he doesn't know who he's talking to, and that he should freaking just be bowing down right in front of him. Because what this doesn't tell us is that Captain Sean Bernard is to be in the Vesson world royalty. He is to be tied to a family that is to be Vesson royalty. And so this guy is to like be the one that is to be kind of a high tier kind of Vesson person, so to speak. So we have the captain that is to have this guy bow in front of him, and so the captain is to tell this Reaper, hey, like, back off, go home, and I will definitely make sure that you get that message, because the captain is to go on and lob off this guy's ear. He's to go for the Mike Tyson approach and lob off the guy's ear. And so the Reaper is bleeding, and so the captain is just like, I just wanted to make that clear. So we just now finally have to assume that the Reapers are no longer going to be a thing to deal with. Because I'm like, yeah, I didn't remember much of that being played out within the show. And like, I don't even know why they introduced these characters just to like get rid of them. It just kind of feels like a waste. Like, if they would have had them in like one episode that they showed up later, like, I would have been like, okay, that's cool. Like, having them so early in the show just to get rid of them, just that just seems dumb. I don't know, it just like is a weird thing that they just added in, but I guess they are like, well, we don't know where to really go with this. But it gave something for the captain to do, so that's great, right? So now that I've covered that, so let's go on and let's cover like the main thing. So in the beginning of this episode, we have a woman who is running off into the night. She breaks this window, is then kind of running to this bridge. I believe that this is Faith Collins, but I'm not quite 100% sure about that. So we have this woman who is running late at night, and so we have all of a sudden this bridge that is to start to have this monster upon it, this bridge part monster that is attacking this woman. And then we turn around and have this light fixture that all of a sudden turns into this kind of blade that is spinning around and wanting to try and attack this woman. She's like, oh my god, wild! Wild! Like, that's not what she says, but like, wild, right? This is cray-cray for realsies. So we have this woman who is screaming her head off in terror because she's having these crazy hallucinations that are brought upon by a gas that had been put to her that had start to make her do all these crazy hallucinations. And so we all of a sudden have this man who runs her down via this vehicle, and it's to realize that she is still alive. And so we have this other man that is to touch this driver and tell him, hey, call the police. And while he's doing that, the other person is to go on and kind of put hand and mouth of this one to suffocate her to kill her off. So we have this driver that is to be at the scene, and so Nick and Hank are to kind of get his get his report on what happened. And so like the girl was just in the middle of the road, he couldn't swerve in time, so he accidentally hit her. And so he mentions that like the girl was breathing at the time that he called 911, and he thought that she was. But so they're like, okay, like we believe that like you like didn't purposely run this girl over, like something else is happening here. So they end up asking the guy about like the other man that was there, and there wasn't like a clear idea of what that guy really looked like. 'Cause he's like, yeah, I don't know, it's too dark. So they first go on, and both Nick and Hank, they go on to question the husband. Come to find out, the husband has had a history of hurting his wife at certain points. And so they go on and question this guy. And so come to find out, the husband is to mention that he was hangry. And so coming off a very long shift, he just got very hungry. And so that was the reason why like he had an argument with his wife that led her to leave him. And so it seems that Nick and Hank believe this guy's story, and they're like, okay, so like where did she go off at the middle of the night? Like where could she have gone uh to kind of get away from this man? And so they come to find out that they were to have found this card that was to be to this B&B. And so Hank was to go on and tell Nick, like, hey man, like I guess this case is leading us to a B&B. And so Nick is going on and saying, like, man, like, you know that I haven't gone on and I haven't slept very often, and like, you know, I have nothing for me to do with a bed or breakfast. Ah ha ha ha. Because of course, because also when looking at a show, like for a lead on a show, like you're there for like 16 hours supposedly, um, like being the lead. Like if you're other kind of assortment of characters, like you're not there like as much, but like I'm saying that as if I've been on a show before. Um, or sometimes you're just kind of waiting around to get your call of when like your scene is coming up. So like you could probably be there for like 16 hours of that day, but then you're just kind of waiting around to get your scene done, and then just like, okay, well, there was my X number of hours that I was here uh, for that one scene that I was in, that I just said, hey, and then like that's it. But hey, like that's better to like you, you get paid for that, but still, um, I'm I'm sure that like a number of actors will go on and tell you it's like, yeah, it looks glamorous, but then when eventually you get into the system, and yeah, like it's a lot of waiting around. Or if you're to be like the lead of the show, it's like you going on and just being there all the time, whether or not you're having legitimate lines or not. Uh, yeah. Anyways, pushing on. I spent too much time. So we have Nick and Hank going to this B&B, and that leads us to a character named Billy Capra. Uh, the actor Patrick, I had also seen him on the show Happy, and so it's like, oh yeah, like yeah, I guess he was on the show, and I'm sure like an actor like this would probably get used in a number of different like shows and situations and guest stars and whatever. And you just gotta hope that you're gonna have another like acting gig coming out of somewhere. But yeah, but I saw him on Happy. I was like, oh yeah, like I remember this guy. So like some of these Grimm episodes, like I remember some of them, and then others, like I'm like they go into the blender of whatever. I think I remembered like the pilot episode, uh, and like I remembered like the beginning, like the Sweet Dreams thing. I remember that. But it also becomes a blur because it kind of stereotypically that's like the go-to opening for a lot of shows. But still, like I was like, oh yeah, I remember this pilot. But other than like it'll be some random episodes that I'll probably remember. I'll probably remember a lot more in the later seasons than I probably will in the early one. Just because my life eventually becomes a blur for what all I've seen and what all I know. So, especially for this show. So, anyways, we have Nick and Hank that are talking to Billy, and the way that Nick is to find out that Billy is to be a Vesson is because he looks into this fountain and is to see the reflection and is to realize that Billy is to be a goat Vesson. And so because Nick and Hank go on to this B&B, and Billy is to be kind of your stereotypical B&B guy that's very happy and happy-go-lucky, and he meets this other couple that's like, yeah, we had a great time, and Billy's like, great. He's like, yeah. So Billy is to go on and send both Nick and Hank on to seeing all the flowers and the fountains and all these things, and Billy's telling him, it's like, well, yeah, like, if you go through all this, I'm sure you're definitely going to want to stay. And Nick and Hank are just like, is he high on something? So Billy goes on and explains, like, all these flowers, and, like, he knows every, specificity, whatever that word is. He knows a bunch of specific information about certain things to the point where he's like, don't even get me started on those. Don't give me this. Like, I'll talk about them for hours. And so all of a sudden, Nick accidentally just steps on some certain toads, and Billy's just like, oh my god, you killed these frogs. And Hank is like, well, I'm sorry. So come to find out, Billy is to consistently consume these frogs, but it's horrible if Nick steps on them. I guess, or I digress. So so they're talking to Billy and mentioning about the woman that, of course, had came in, and so Billy is to state that she was to come in there, but there was no convincing her to stay. And probably having Billy realize that this woman is single and ready to mingle again, it seems that Billy probably took advantage of this girl and tried to keep her there against her will, but she found a way to escape. And then Billy went on and tried to go after her and try to take her, and that's what just led to her death. Plus, it seemed like this B&B was close to where that bridge was, and so they really just had to think that wherever this bridge was to have also been where the attacker was. So they kind of figured that out. So how they retie Monroe into this episode is we have at one point where they are going on and doing a stakeout, and when we have Nick that is to like, okay, well, I'm gonna take a nap, like you take the first watch and let me know if you spot this guy coming out. And so Nick is to immediately pat on Hank and say like, hey, like he's going out. And Hank's like, are you serious? And he's like, no, I'm serious. So Nick and Hank go on, and so something happens here where Hank and Nick have to split up. And so what happens is that Nick decides to call Monroe and say like, hey man, like I need you to come to this bar. Are you familiar with the name of this bar? And Monroe is just like, yeah, like I'll be there. So Monroe is to be told by Nick to just kind of watch over this Billy character. And we also had Nick who was to ask Monroe about the Zigavolk also, where Nick just kind of interrupts Monroe on his cello, and he asks him about it. And so Monroe is to mention that the reason why this guy eats these frogs is so that way he can go on and easily get these women to do all of his bidding. Because when he consumes these frogs, like it's even better for him to get all these women to do what he wants. So, because this guy is a breeder and a herder. So this guy uses this B&B as a smokescreen to obtain all these women in all these cages underground in his B&B. So, because we find out that Billy is putting all these plates in front of all these cages and all these women are grabbing all these things of food. So, Monroe goes into this bar to watch over Billy as he is collecting yet another woman to make his way to have her come to his B&B. And so Monroe is listening to this conversation, and so at some point while Monroe is hearing this guy, it seems that even Monroe is succumbing to Billy's weakness, and Monroe gets tempted to leave this bar because even Monroe wanted to go on and buy this guy a drink with the money that he was given by Nick to go into this bar. And so it was kind of funny because Nick started handing him money. It's like, dude, that's not like that's enough money for like a beer and like a little bit of food, like an onion ring. Like, come on, like give me some real money. Like, let me get really smashed here. Come on, Nick, pony up the dough. So we have Monroe who tells Nick, like, well, yeah, it seems like he's gonna go on and get another woman. Like, you better act fast, because even I like was almost succumbing to Billy's advances or his frog like breath. So Hank is to the reason why Hank had separated from Nick is because since Billy's now gone from the B&B, Hank decided to go into the B&B and start looking around. And that's why they end up getting separated. I was like, okay, like figure it out. Why are they separated now? So Hank goes in to then realize once he's in this B&B, he ends up succumbing to the hallucinations. He ends up seeing at one point a snake that starts to attack him, and so he ends up falling unconscious by the women's cages because he is not aware of the hallucinating like valves that are right by the door. He just sees that this door is there and that he wants to go on and save these women and not realize that there is some gas coming in. So Billy is coming back to the B&B, and so Nick is now calling Hank to get him, like, hey guy, get out of there. And so Nick is to put a trace on Hank's phone, and the guys are like, yeah, we're taking our sweet time, we don't know where he is. And it's like, I'm sorry, like, is this like the traditional like cop movie where like, hey, keep him on the line until like it's like the perfect time for you to just say where he is, or that you lost the signal, and it doesn't work that way in reality? Like, immediately, like, you know where that person is, unless they're on a train moving somewhere consistently, or they're on a transportation thing somewhere. Like, you should immediately know where this person is, unless they somehow miraculously have like the ability uh, to kind of what, like, ghost their cell phone or something along those lines, where like you think they're actually talking on so and so's cell phone, but they're actually talking on another one. I don't know. Those weird gadget movies, whatever they do, to ghost the cell phone signal. But anyways, so maybe it must be the Vesson ability to ghost cell phones, that they can't track it right away. Anyways, I'm wasting too much time with this joke. So Nick realizes that Hank is still back in the house. So Nick runs to find out where Hank is, and that leads both Nick and Hank left into that room with all the girls that are caged up. And so Billy is to lock both Nick and Hank in this room and full blast the gas. So both Nick and Hank are to realize that they can't go on and shoot their way out of this room. Well, Hank does, but he's like, hey man, the gas. And so they instead have to like brute force it. They have to muscle their way out of this room. And so while that's going on, we have Billy, who is to try to get to the woman that was so seduced by Billy. She's like, oh, hey, yeah, I'm here. Like, I couldn't wait a moment. And Billy's like, well, great. Like, then he ends up realizing that, like, yeah, like, this is not the right time. So shoo away, woman, because I have better things to do. Like, it's glad that I got another woman over here, but yeah, like, you're a dime a dozen because I can go and get any woman that I want. Because that's what this Vesson is technically like. So he kind of scares her away, and so maybe she should have gone with Monroe. That will, at some point, like, that will matter, because at some point Monroe will be tied up with his own Vesson at some point in the later parts of the show. And anyways, so we have at one point that the Nick and Hank are to go after Billy, and so at some point that leads to both Nick and Hank kind of taking down Billy. And so really by the end of this episode, we see that Billy is now in this gurney and he's getting hauled away. And coming to find out, the ambulance person that is kind of looking over him just so happens to be a woman. So Billy can immediately use his ability to then have this woman just kind of like, oh yeah, like I'm definitely gonna take care of you, Billy, and not put you to jail. So because they go on to figure out that this guy is not a serial murderer, that he's a serial guy that goes on and takes advantage of women. I'm not going to say the actual word because that's a horrible word to say anyways, and I don't like saying it anyways. But yeah, so this guy is to go on and just continue to take advantage of women because he has this ability to lure them in. So with that said, that does cover most of this episode. Let me know if there's something that I did forget about, because I know that there probably is. And I always like to say that at the end of every single review that I do, because I know that there was mistakes that had been made. Uh, and there's also, like, when we get towards the end of the episode, stuff starts to get foggy, and I'm just like, I don't remember everything. Or there's just certain sections of stuff that I always forget, or I didn't say it in the perfect whatever, but anyways. I always say that by the end of every review. I apologize. But I'm going to keep doing it anyways. Like, because who knows if there's ever going to be a new person here or whatever. So, and that seems to be my outro shtick anyway. So, goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. Yeah. At the end of episode 3, I don't know if I said this or not. I probably did. But at the end of episode 3, we go on and have Nick and Juliet sleeping in their bed. And we, of course, have Nick who gets up to kind of shut the window. All of a sudden, there ends up getting this bee that flies into the room and stings Nick. And, like, by the end of the episode, if Nick didn't get any kind of bee stings from episode 3, by the end of it, he does. So that's one thing that I kind of wanted to cover. But I think, other than that, I think everything else was covered via this. Let me know in the comments below if there's any little detail, via small or massively huge, that I forgot about. Because at the end of the day, I could probably say it's like, well, that's what a rebuttal is for, being next week. But anyways, goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. Let me know, the Reaper, if that was the same Vesson as the Holden from before. I don't think it was. Like, I think it was a different Vesson. But let me know what that Vesson was. Like, or let me know what Vesson Holden was. Maybe, because I ended up just saying that it was like, I just said it was a Reaper Vesson. Like, I didn't know if there was like a certain specific kind or whatever. And plus also, like, for like the way of which that I watch Grimm, it's kind of like goofy or whatever. Like it isn't the cleanest way to watch the show. But I also could have gone on, and if I legitimately had a way, like I have all like the DVDs, I could have watched those if I had a TV that was set up and whatever. But still, but yeah. But anyways, with that said, I'm just gonna go on and just get out of here. Let me know in the comments below. Whatever. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.